have the feeling that the world has put you on fast forward and you're having trouble keeping up, the next speaker is going to have what could be a key for you to help in that area. That's why we have these conferences, because we have to keep up. But there's so much material that's written and printed material that we need to absorb every day. If you're like us, you get a lot of junk mail, and of course you ought to read it all. Or get it digested, or get whatever you want digested. And there's so much material coming out, you can get enough material here to run you for months and months, as you know. Dick Welch is going to talk to us about a process that he has researched and developed over a period of the last 14 or 15 years, spent a lot of money on finding out what the key was, how to do it, and that sort of thing. And he teaches this course called Subliminal Dynamics, and of course has people all over the country. And it is doing the same thing now. He's trained a group of teachers. He's taught over 8,000 or more people so far in this method. And I think you're going to be fascinated by listening to and hearing about subliminal dynamics. So first from Omaha, Nebraska, now from California, or wherever, because he's on the road all the time. Welcome Dick Welch this morning, please. If you need this, Dick.
Well, I think we're okay. Everybody hear me all right? That okay? Okay. Thank you, Dean. Well, it's my pleasure certainly to be here this morning to share with you something that's extremely exciting, and something that, as Dean alluded to, can really truly allow us to keep up with this information age that we're in today. I think maybe I should preface this by saying that we're the only people in the world that teach this. It was discovered quite by accident 15 years ago in Phoenix, Arizona. I was looking for a better way to speed read. I had purchased a speed reading academy in Phoenix and really knew nothing about speed reading. I guess that was a blessing. I'd come off of an early retirement in the insurance industry and had moved to Arizona to find out what my next calling would be, and ended up buying this speed reading company. In 1975, about 90 days into owning this speed reading company, I became very disillusioned with the speed reading industry. Not because speed reading did not work, but because what I saw happening in the industry was just absolutely startling to me. Here was a process that worked. Comprehension was better, retention was better from speed reading than it was from reading. Thousands of people, probably millions at this point, have gone through speed reading courses. Many paid hundreds of dollars to do it, had learned the skill, and yet 90% of them within 90 days had regressed back to reading. Now, that was not only a very startling statistic for someone that was in the speed reading business to know about, but it also really bugged me, to be honest with you, because here was something that worked. Why would people leave that alone? Why would they not continue using it? And what I went around the country, interviewed over 5,000 people that had recently come out of speed reading courses, and I kept hearing the same thing over and over and over again. It went something like this. Gosh, I'm no longer repeating the words back to myself like I do when I read, or subvocalizing the words. And so I must be skimming and scanning. And if I'm skimming and scanning, I'm not getting it all. So I better go back to reading. And what they were literally doing was talking themselves out of using this process, which at that time I didn't really understand at all, the differences between the conscious and the subconscious parts of the brain. I'd come from a very structured background. And all I knew was they were talking themselves out of it. Today I know that the conscious mind was literally talking them out of it. After hearing this over and over again, I decided that, gosh, what was happening to these words that were no longer being subvocalized? Were they just lost in space? Were they actually being utilized in the brain? What was taking place? And I felt truly that they were being utilized in the brain, that they weren't just lost in space. But I didn't know for sure, so I went to all the heads of different speed reading companies around the country. Being a neophyte in the business myself, I figured they might know a little more about it than I did, certainly. And even included Evelyn Woods in that, who had developed speed reading following World War II, and asked the question, what happens to the words that are no longer subvocalized? And the answer was, we don't know. No one had ever found out the answer to that question. Nobody had ever researched it. No one had taken the time to either discover or not discover what happens to those words that are no longer subvocalized. So I set out to build a better mousetrap. I set out to find out why and what was taking place with those words that were no longer being subvocalized. And I went into it with a premise that I felt they were being utilized in the brain, because why would comprehension be better and why would retention be better from speed reading rather than from reading? Initially, I set up classes in my school in Phoenix, cross-sectioned it with people from age 9 to age 72 originally, since from age 5 to 93. Cross-sectioned it with IQs of varying degrees, certainly a variety of different learning disabilities were included, and a whole different ream, if you will, or spectrum of materials to be read were dealt with, all the way from heavy technical material to rather light reading. And I went to my instructors and authorized them to go faster and faster and faster through the material and measure specifically direct results by eliminating more and more subvocalization. Would comprehension change? Would it get better, worse, stay the same? What would happen to retention as well? And retention was pretty easy to measure because, very honestly, it didn't last too long from reading or speed reading, which I'll get into in just a minute. The fact was, there was a direct correlation. The faster people went through the material, the less they subvocalized or read the material, the higher the comprehension got and the better the retention got. Now, let me just give you an example, and so that the conscious reasoning part of your minds has something to latch onto about what I'm talking about here. This little diagram will point out to you the differences between reading, speed reading, and subliminal photography. New phrase there, subliminal photography. That's what we called this process, and I named it in 1980. It was actually discovered in 1975. According to the National Education Association, the average adult reader in the United States reads at about 250 words a minute. That's approximately 1 page per minute. However, that's pretty light material. If we, in dealing with doctors, attorneys, people that are dealing with more technical information, this changed quite dramatically, about 70 to 90 words a minute. When we went to NASA and some of the scientific community, we found that this even dropped as low as 30 words a minute to deal with that type of material. So you can get an idea of how slow we read collectively and as a society. Again, we're subvocalizing, saying all the words to ourselves. If you'll remember, back when you learned how to read in school, the first thing, they started maybe over at the side of the room, gosh, would you stand up and read out loud the first paragraph to the class, and then the next person got their turn, and on around the room we went until everybody had their turn. And then somewhere along the line the teacher said to us, okay, now it's time to read to ourselves. And from that point on, for the rest of our lives, all we did was, rather than saying the words out loud to everybody, we just said them inwardly to ourselves. That's reading. It's called subvocalization as opposed to vocalization. Now, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, the world's fastest talker talks at 500 and some words a minute. So that's it, folks. That's the physical limitation right there. There's no one going to read any faster than that. And the fact is, the majority of us read around 250 words a minute. We've tested out over 8,000 people and found our average to be about 251, 252 words a minute. So it's very, very close to the National Education Association's statistics. What's maybe even more startling than how fast we read, or how slow we read, if you will, is how we comprehend and retain the material. Reading something through one time now, not going over it and studying it, or repetition of the material over and over and over again, but just going through it once, we find that the average adult comprehension is about 50%. 50%. Not too exciting. But here's where it really drops off, retention. Because we lose 90% of that 50% within 48 hours. Our retention from reading actually allows us to retain about 5% of what we read through one time beyond 48 hours. Yet this is the primary vehicle for learning. It's the way we're taught to assimilate information and to learn. It's amazing to me that we learn anything. All of us have had to go through this cramming for exams. Going through school, I mean, boy, we're reading right up to the minute we walk in the door to take that exam. And here's the reason why, obviously. We lose it so rapidly, we've got to have it right there to take our test. And really, what's amazing to me is we go through and pass tests going through school and get grades and end up graduating. I get a kick out of people that, and I'm not knocking it, but who have a PhD. They've taken a lot of tests and passed them. They've spent time, a lot of time, reading the material so they could pass their tests. But the fact is that's, I wonder how much they really retain after they pass the tests. I know I didn't retain that much. So many times it's like we have to pass a test and then later on in life we never use it again. Let's go to speed reading. What is speed reading in comparison to reading? Speed reading is nothing more than going beyond the physical limitation of repeating all the words back to ourselves or subvocalizing. In other words, we've gone beyond that 500 and some words a minute, and certainly beyond our average of 250 words a minute, so that now we're subvocalizing some of the words, but definitely not all of them. The words we're subvocalizing, we're reading. That's still reading. But we're not subvocalizing the majority of the words when we're going at, say, 1,000 words a minute. And that's a good solid speed reader, especially when you consider that 90% of them regress back to reading within 90 days. So if you retain a level of 1,000 words a minute, you've done pretty well. But what's really interesting is, not only are you going faster, so you're getting through the material quicker, saving a lot of time, comprehension goes up to about 60% going through the material one time. Now, that's a pretty substantial increase for just going through it once. And retention is considerably better, quite good for about a week. Then it nosedives. But that's a whole lot better than losing 90% of the 50% you got in 48 hours from reading. And yet people regress back to reading in enormous percentages after learning how to speed read. And again, it's this conscious mind saying, gosh, if I didn't read the word, if I didn't say it to myself or subvocalize it, I must not have got it. It's like it just was lost. It's like you didn't see it, is the connotation that you get. But the fact is you did see it, and you got it. Because here comes in subliminal photography. Subliminal photography begins when you're going so fast through the material that you no longer can subvocalize at all. It begins at approximately 25,000 words a minute, more accurately 2 pages a second. At approximately 2 pages a second, you've now gotten to the point where it's physically impossible to focus on the page and read or subvocalize the words. But we even go a step further than that, because what we found out is that when you're dealing with what we're dealing with in subliminal photography and the part of the brain that does this, as Dr. Farr mentioned yesterday, it's irrelevant whether you get this material right side up and frontwards or upside down and backwards or sidewards, or you can get it anyway. Because the part of the brain you're dealing with doesn't require focusing and reading. It just literally takes a picture of it as it goes by at the rate of 2 pages a second or faster. Now that is why I've put down here 25,000 plus. Because the plus, we've tested this way beyond 25,000 words a minute. 25,000 words a minute represents 2 pages a second with relatively large print. You can go at 2 pages a second with relatively small print and get up to 100,000 words a minute quite easily. In our course that we teach, everybody experiences 25,000 to 52,000 words a minute, simply the difference in the size of the print. You're dealing with a constant speed of 2 pages a second. But we did find out, in fact, in our testing, that you could even go faster than that. We found out what the physical dexterity limitations were in turning pages, is what it boils down to. But we had people going up and up and up this ladder of words per minute to astronomical figures. Back in 1975 and 76, actually went beyond the world speed reading record on a daily basis with 6, 7, 8, 10 people a day breaking the existing world's record of 100,000 words a minute at the time. And eventually a young boy in Mesa, Arizona by the name of Larry Maper, a 15-year-old freshman in high school there, peaked out at an amazing 606,000 words a minute, physically turning pages. Did this in front of about 30 educators in our school in Phoenix, went through the novel Ben-Hur in 30 seconds, and then took a 100-question in-depth written test over the material that had been provided by these educators and scored 90% on it. What was possibly more startling than that, folks, is that Larry Maper was a dyslexic. Larry Maper had read one book in his entire life prior to that. He was a D student in school. He was looking forward to the time that he could drop out at the age of 16. And yet the next semester, Larry Maper went back to school and in 2 weeks completed his entire semester's curriculum with straight A's. And 3 semesters later graduated from high school a straight A honor student 1 full year early. Larry wasn't alone. We've tested this in the Phoenix Elementary School District, 1977. The district staff, the principals, reading teachers, special ed teachers going through the course to begin with, and then hand-picking 3 students out of each school, 1 underachiever, 1 average student, 1 excelling student, a variety of learning disabilities represented, a variety of IQs represented, socioeconomic backgrounds, and so on. They were all pre-tested. We found out what their grade levels were in all their different subjects. Then they were brought in and we worked with them 3 hours a day for 5 days, just 1 week. Taught them the process, how to utilize it, and so on. Then they were turned loose to use this on their own for approximately an hour a day in conjunction with their study halls, with their own materials they were dealing with in school. And after 15 total days from beginning to end, then they were post-tested. In 15 days, in the areas of English, vocabulary, and reading skills, they had jumped an average of 6.5 years in grade level. In the areas of math and science and the more technical fields, they had jumped an average of 4.5 years in 15 days. Had no bearing whatsoever on what their socioeconomic backgrounds happened to be, had no bearing on their IQs, had no bearing on any learning disabilities that they may have had at the time. Currently, we're teaching this in a public school system of all places in Council Bluffs, Iowa, to the learning disabled. And we have had a full-page newspaper article written about this after these these young folks went through this course and used it in their schools for 1 semester. Now, these were C and D students in special education, not even eligible to get into the regular curriculums at all. They were just hanging on in the public school systems by a thread. Very low confidence levels, very low self-esteem, variety of learning disabilities, many of them with very low IQs and so on. In 1 semester, they had jumped collectively out of the special ed curriculum completely and into the regular curriculum and were B students in the regular curriculum. Needless to say, their self-confidence levels had skyrocketed. Their self-esteem levels had gone up dramatically. And I think another obvious byproduct that you might see is not only were they excelling academically, but they had already branched out into other areas of performance in school and away from school and gone into those areas with very positive attitudes and accomplished very outstanding things. Their whole lives had changed, is what it boils down to. Subliminal photography has a couple of other very exciting elements in it in comparison to reading and speed reading. Average comprehension going through the material one time again jumps to 77%. And I often get the question asked, well, gosh, if they're taking a picture of the information, why isn't it 100%? The reason is simply this, folks. The next time you get a chance, look at a paperback book or a book period, see how it's cut. It's not designed for subliminal photographers. They're designed for readers. They're cut in a square corner. And have you never tried it before, just try turning some pages at 2 pages a second for a while, and you'll find you're not too used to that, and you're going to miss some pages. That's okay. That's all right, though. What we have found is you're going to miss an average about 23% of the pages going through the book at that speed. And if you didn't see it, you didn't get it. You didn't take a picture of it. So your average comprehension going through it once is about 77%. 100 minus that 23% of the pages that you missed. Now to correct that, all we have to do, we have found, is go through the material 3 times. Because if you go through the material 3 times, you're going to miss an average of 23% of the pages each time, but they won't be the same ones. And you'll have seen over 90% of the book. You'll be an A student. You'll score an A on exams at that point. And to go through the book, just to give you a perspective of what 2 pages a second means, in the second class of this course, you go through and photograph a 118-page book, upside down and backwards, by the way, without your glasses, because they're not needed at all. It'll take you 1 minute to go through a 118-page book. Then you're going to take a 50-question test over it. And what's even more remarkable, as that's true, false, multiple choice, and fill-in questions, you're going to know the answers. Because what happens is the test question triggers the answer right back out through the same channel it went in. And we show you how to access that part of the brain and allow that information to come back through. It's about 6 ways we show you how to do that. Here may be the most startling statistic of all. Because you have taken this information in and literally taken a picture of it with your mind, a verbatim picture, it's instantly into the memory banks of the mind, 100% retention for life. Large volumes of information that heretofore would have been completely physically impossible to read now are accessible to anyone. Everyone can do this. This is a God-given ability we were born with. We never lose it till the day we die. We have simply been programmed out of using it. You and I all use this automatically from the time we were born until about the time we started at school. This amazing ability to learn that we all possessed from birth, we had a photographic memory, folks, every one of us. We learned at a tremendously accelerated pace. All you have to do to prove that is take a preschool child, read a book to them today, and next week read them the same book and make a mistake. They'll point it out right now where you made the mistake. And they don't even know how to read yet. But they heard it once. That's what we all possess. That's the ability we possess, but we simply have lost track of using it. How? Again, the National Education Association points out to us the learning curve of life. Interesting. We start out at age 0. Nobody's ever named this method of learning here between 0 and age 5 that was automatic, that was natural. But wow, was it effective. In fact, depending on which expert you're talking to, as much as 90% of our learning takes place right there in our lives. What happens at age 5? We go to school. We get to learn how to learn now. They teach us how to learn. It's called a rote memory system of learning. It's based on repetition, 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 and reading as its primary vehicle. Wow, is that efficient? And what happens is we get stalemated by the time we're about 6 or 7 years old. We've lost our photographic memory. We're programmed right out of using it. We've stymied the use of the subconscious part of the brain that we learned automatically and naturally with until that time, and now we've become basically a robot with an extremely inefficient way to learn. Now, I'm not knocking the teaching profession. They don't know another way. This is how they're taught too. But there is another way, and this is it. And it's right back to the way that we were doing it naturally and automatically until we were told another way. But for some reason, we didn't continue using that way. It was too good, I guess. What's really interesting is no matter where you are out here, the learning curve goes down the rest of your life once you start to be taught how to learn. Amazing. It not only just doesn't go up as much or level off, it goes down. We spend the next 12 to 16 years of our life educating our conscious, basically our conscious reasoning part of the brain, which represents maybe 10% at the most of our brain's potential. If we had it completely educated, it would only represent maybe 10% of our brain's potential. The 90% that's really not being utilized and being suppressed is this that we were using naturally here. And all we do in this course is take you back to using a very natural, automatic way to learn that you've all done before. That's why it's simple. It's easy to do, and it's natural. Every one of us possesses the ability. We just have to get back in touch with it. Be shown how to get back in touch and use it. And what happens is, no matter what age you are on this scale, as you go along, it just reverses this, goes right back up again, just like it did there. It allows you to do that almost instantaneously. We can show you, anyone, how to subliminally photograph, the mechanics of it. You can photograph a book, take a test over it, pass the test in the next half hour. That's how easy it is, any one of you. Some very interesting additional things take place by using this process. Certainly Dr. Farr alluded to several things yesterday that are definitely an enhancement. When your vision is brought to a higher degree because of a retina adjustment, allowing you to assimilate more light, to become more aware and perceptive so that you can process this information, definitely an enhancement. No question about that. What we're dealing with here is automatically, however, as a byproduct of using this process, an awareness and perception level goes up quite dramatically, measurably 7 to 10 times the norm. Now that is so dramatic that in fact what you're doing is opening up an entire world to yourself that has always been there, but you simply haven't been perceiving it before. You'll all of a sudden be aware and see and perceive things that right in your own home that, gosh, you haven't noticed for years possibly. Or driving to work that, wow, I go by that every day, but I don't remember ever seeing that. It also allows you to do something else that Dr. Farr talked about yesterday, and that is you get to the point where that awareness and perception level go up so dramatically that you cross over the line and you literally anticipate things taking place before they happen. Because the part of the brain you're dealing with has that ability. The subconscious part of the brain, and I'll just lop it in as the subconscious. It's actually a very specific part of the subconscious. But the fact is the subconscious part of the brain is not limited by time nor space. And consequently, it can photograph information at phenomenal rates of speed. By the way, we didn't stop at 606,000 words a minute with Larry Maper. We just stopped turning pages. Nobody could turn pages any faster. Then we went to a machine called a stethoscope, which flashed information at subliminal speeds all the way to 40 milliseconds, which with full pages of written material calculated out to be 2 million words per minute. The machine peaked out, not the mind. The mind was handling it beautifully at 2 million words a minute, but the machine couldn't go any faster. Still, 85 to 95 instant verbal or written recall of the information at 2 million words a minute. That is subliminal. That is outside of the conscious perception. That is so rapidly that you're consciously unaware of anything even being flashed on the screen. but subconsciously you had got it verbatim. Where we've worked with pilots, law enforcement people, special service armed forces units, people in very dangerous occupations, this is a godsend. Awareness and perception levels increasing this dramatically because they have an edge that allows them to anticipate things happening before they happen. When control groups from the Arizona State University campus were tested, they always had a lag time between action and reaction. Varied, but there was always a lag time there. Our students experiencing this process had eliminated that lag time completely. Varied again, anywhere from a split second ahead of time they would be aware of something before it took place, to as much as 48 hours in advance, 2 full days. In this course, we also have found some 350 specific applications to date for the use of the part of the brain we tapped into in 1975. The last several years of research and testing were done in conjunction with the Stanford Research Institute, a lot of private testing that was funded by myself as well. And this testing was really to develop and test out and verify other applications for the use of this part of the brain. It's a very exciting part of the brain. It has enormous capabilities lying within it that we're just being able to start to uncover. You know, dealing with the mind is a very humbling experience. Here I am, a fellow with 2 years college education. I have a staff that's certainly much better educated in that regard than myself for the most part. But I've been blessed to stumble into something that really has and can have an enormously positive impact on our society. Foreign governments have been after this, by the way, for several years. For 11, 12 years now, Japan. I've rejected their offers. I've rejected the offers overseas in South Korea, Australia, some other places. I won't do that forever, but the fact is I want this to take place in this country first. I feel it's imperative that we have this, the use of this in this country first. We're talking about increasing our learning abilities 50 to 100 times the norm. That is such an acceleration that truly we can change with any mass use of this. We can change a society in a very positive manner in a matter of 5 to 10 years. South Korea wants this to put it into their public school systems for 12 million students. Japan wants it in their public school systems. They haven't waited for me, by the way. In 1980, they replaced their counselors in their public school systems with hypnotists. So they're dealing with subconscious learning now. Have you noticed how we're losing out? Have you noticed that over the last few years our education has dropped from first in the world to 14th? Have you noticed how the Japanese are buying up our country? There's some things going on a pretty large scale that something like this can have quite an impact in turning around. And we're very committed to getting this not only in a broad base throughout the United States, but eventually into public education. Wow, that's a cat's meow, though, let me tell you, that public education system. Wow. That's a can of worms if I ever have seen one. But we're working on it. Help us if you can. I want to throw this open for some questions and answers. I can talk about this for days. There are many, many other applications to this, but including health and others. But yes. No, it is not. The question is, could this be used on a rolling machine as opposed to just flashing on a screen or turning pages? And the answer is any of those methods could be utilized, including the rolling screen. We have many people in the computer industry that are using this now, and they're dealing with just what you're talking about in the rolling screen. And you can assimilate the information as fast as it can roll, or it can be flashed, or you can turn pages, any of those things. Yes. How much resistance are we experiencing from the establishment? At times, a lot. Certainly, in the early stages of development of this, an awful lot. I am noticing, however, in the last year or so that those barriers are coming down. And thank God for it. I think we're truly coming into an age of enlightenment. We're truly coming into an age of a mental revolution. And boy, is that going to be exciting. We thought the Industrial Revolution was exciting. The technology revolution was exciting. The mental revolution is going to be something that to truly behold. And we're loving it, being on the cutting edge of that.
I don't know if I can quite articulate this, but my problem is with words versus pictures. You got to have a meaning. You got to know a meaning of a word to be able to do something with the word.
Okay. I believe the question would be, how do you get meaning from this as opposed to just data?
Yeah, or picture.
Okay. It's really no different than reading. It's just that you're doing it much faster. It's kind of like comparing a typewriter to a word processor. You're accessing the part of the brain when you subliminally photograph where all of the memory banks are, where all the information is storehoused that you've taken in since the moment you were born. Everything is there, and you have access to it. All you're doing is putting in new information. Now, it's cross-sectioned with everything else you have there. And one of the neat byproducts of subliminal photography is you photograph a book on a given subject, and then all the information that you know on that subject becomes available to you and gives you cross-reference material. And you know the difference, what just came from what you just photographed and also what came from other sources that maybe you've forgotten, you dealt with years and years ago, but it's still accessible, it's still there. And the meanings come through probably much better even than from reading because you have access to that part of the brain wide open and available.
Is there a way to demonstrate subliminal photography?
We have done so many times, yes. In fact, even on live television on the Today Show at over 200,000 words a minute, it becomes kind of a dog and pony show, unfortunately. It's like most people will say, gosh, I'd like, if I could see that done, then I know I could do it. That truly turns into a bunch of hogwash because what happens is then you see somebody else do it and it's like, oh, wow, they can do it. No way could I do that. And it does become kind of a farce. The fact is I can have you do it in 15 minutes. Yes.
Suppose you wanted to teach a course of differential equations, for example, and you had a book on it. Could you show it to a mature student and have him understand differential equations in 5 seconds or whatever speed you think he can do it? Can he do a problem after that? Do it successfully?
I would say the answer would be yes, but I'm absolutely not positive. All I can tell you is some examples of things we've had happen. We had a salesman up in Minneapolis that went in and photographed a nuclear physics textbook, then went back, took the test over it, then went in and discussed it with a professor, scored in the 90 percentiles on the test, and was able to discuss it in detail. He knew nothing about the subject whatsoever.
The question is, would you trust a handle, let's say on repairing a nuclear reactor, and giving it to a person and showing him in 5 seconds, say, go ahead and fix the nuclear reactor?
Personally, I don't know that I would trust him with a nuclear reactor.
Well, that's the question.
I don't know that I'd trust him if he sat there and read it, though, for the next 10 days. I'm just saying.
Could you hear that question over here? You folks, could you hear him talking? Do you need the mic to hear people when they ask a question? Okay. Hold your hands up. Let's get the question so we can hear it. You have one here, didn't you, John?
How long?
Wait a minute, Alvin. We're over here now.
How long does the average person need to learn this method?
It's really instantaneous that you can experience it and you have the ability to use it. The conscious mind, it will take about 3 weeks of using it regularly so that it establishes a habit and will accept it and have the confidence to use it regularly.
Over here.
Hi, last night there was Dr. Wayne Farr who told us about vision, and what I'd like to know is if you could address the relationship of being able to be successful with this and one's vision, the ability to have that total vision that he was talking about last night.
According to Dr. Farr, we had a talk this morning about this, and by the way, Dr. Farr has gone through this course. He also instructs this course. It would be very definitely helpful to have an open spectrum of vision to help with the awareness and the assimilating of the information. Approximately, and I don't know if Wayne's still here or not, but he mentioned this morning approximately 25% of the population has somewhat of an impairment in the spectrum of the vision. Now that simply means that they might not be able to hang on to the use of this process in subliminal photography as long as someone that had it more open. They would certainly be able to do it and experience it, but it simply would mean that they would have to deal with it more on a repetitive basis to keep it in line, and it would definitely be helpful to go in and have a retina adjustment to open up the vision further.
Okay. How does this process handle the problem of transferring conceptual knowledge? Say, in a child of 5 years old doesn't know how to read yet. How do we transfer these ideas, these concepts, using this process, or is it possible?
Yes, one of the things we do as far as language is concerned is in the very first lesson with everybody, we have you start photographing thesauruses and dictionaries so that your vocabulary instantly is improved considerably, your spelling is improved, your understanding of what the words mean, so on.
This presupposes that I already know how to read and have an understanding of some of the words.
Well, you can learn a foreign language the same way. It doesn't make any difference. You don't have to know, but the meanings of the words are there in the dictionary so that you get not only the word and its spelling, but what it means.
Okay.
And now it'll take you longer to speak the language. You can install the vocabulary, but to learn to speak it, it'll take a few weeks normally.
How much does phonetics in the language play a part in this process?
That's a good question. I don't really know the answer. I don't know of a language that you could not learn at this point. We have people using it with Japanese. But truly, I don't know the answer, I guess, so I better just say that. What part does phonetics have to play?
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
please tell us about your program. Can you elaborate any more as far as when do we start?
We have a class beginning right here in Orlando on Monday. And it will run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings. These are 4 3-hour sessions over the 4 days. That's all it takes. We have classes in the Los Angeles area running now, in the Denver area running now. We'll be opening up the New York area, Phoenix, Seattle, and all parts across the country. Within the next year, we're hopeful to be in every major metropolitan area in that period of time. We're very busy training instructors as well as putting people through the course. We do limit the classes to 25 people. So there's a lot of individual attention that goes into it. But right here in Orlando, next Monday we have classes beginning, and we'll run them pretty consistently after that.
Did we get you answered yet, Alvin?
Well, in a way, I'm not really completely satisfied. If what you say is true, then perhaps school is completely unnecessary. All you'd have to do is simply take the children and let them view these books at a very rapid rate, and they could spend 15 minutes a day and go home, and you could turn out fully educated citizens. This is quite a challenge.
Yes,
I'm very skeptical about that.
All right, let me answer that in one way. We have brought in the top curriculum writer for the public school systems in 1978 into Phoenix, had him go through the course, interview the educators behind this. We had the state director of education in Arizona behind this at the time. Certainly the state PTA. many of the top educators and department heads and so on at Arizona State University and the public system there. And yet, it was such a radical departure from the learning methods and the accelerated learning that was involved that the public schools simply couldn't install it. It was physically impossible. We would have to go in, retrain all the teachers, all the administrators, and then go in and retrain all the students. And in the meantime, adjust and upgrade dramatically the curriculums. Because what was discovered was that if we dealt with an hour a day, like in conjunction with study halls, starting at the age of 5, when a student would start to school, by the time they were 12, they would have their first college degrees. And it would not make any difference what their IQs were, what their learning disabilities were, or their socioeconomic backgrounds were. They could all do that. What was really narrow-minded to me that I heard time and time and again at that time was, what are we going to do with a 12-year-old in the job market? In the first place, why would we put them in the job market with a college degree at the age of 12? Why not have master's, doctorate degrees, specialize in given fields, and graduate them at the age of 20, and really have something to deal with, and a complete change in our society? We don't have to, just because somebody has a degree, put them in the job market at the age of 12. That was kind of ridiculous to me, but anyway.
Will the course be taught here in this hotel?
Actually, we're set up now to hold it over on the other side of town at the Sheraton North. But we got enough people here that want to go. We'll get you over there.
And will, if it's not at this hotel, it'll be over there, and you have any idea what the rates will be over there or anything?
At that hotel?
Yes.
I don't know what they charge for a room over there, but there's lots of other hotels in the area, so.
And if the first class, if there's only 25 to a class and more sign up, will you have 2 classes?
Oh, yes.
Will it be one after the other one or simultaneous?
Yes. Well, we can run them both ways, actually. We have, we definitely plan on having one right behind it, which would run 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. But the course is, it's been asked how much is the course. The course is $495. The results are guaranteed, totally guaranteed. You will photograph in excess of 25,000 words a minute with better comprehension than you read with.
How are we doing for time, Gary? We okay?
5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Could this be taught by video, even though you won't
It
at this
could
time?
be, but very honestly, I'm hesitant to put it out that way because there's a lot of very valuable things that happen in the interaction between the people in the room. And on a video, that's left out.
Well, they have a table. They will have a table afterwards. This has answered a couple of your questions here to talk to them further about this.
I have one question. What part of the brain of the anatomical structure are you really tapping in? Would you care to discuss this area?
I would love to, but I won't. The reason I won't is that it is covered under a trade secret, which is the only way that we can protect the process from somebody else duplicating it in the United States. There isn't any person that deals with the brain, and certainly a medical doctor or a brain scientist or anything like that, that would not know what we're dealing with as far as the specific part of the brain. The fact is, the path to it, the specific part of the brain, the process itself has been written down on paper, copied, sent through the mail to myself, deposited in 2 different safety deposit boxes in 2 different cities, and remains a trade secret, and that's the only way I can protect it. There's not any way to patent it, if you will. So that's the way to do it.
Question I have right now is this. In college, we have a lot of people with degrees. They don't have an education in horse sense. Can you get that? Because and nothing is worse than having somebody with a sheepskin and not a bit of common sense. If you incorporate that, victory.
I'll go with that all the way.
They don't have enough bee pollen, right, Jim?
Is there any relationship between what advertisers know and understand about subliminal seduction and what you're talking about?
Absolutely.
Wow, you bet.
We go into that in this course. when this awareness and perception level raises as it does, you will definitely be able to see it without any problem whatsoever. We expose it. Unfortunately, a lot of it is negative, and certainly the fact that you become so aware of it going on, it loses its impact to you. And then we teach you how to reprogram your own mind, which this part of the brain is very programmable that you're in touch with, and utilize that direct programming to yourself on a daily basis, following some very specific guidelines, including being specific, being detailed, always positive, and always with good to all concerned. We're dealing with an extremely powerful part of the brain which can manifest things to happen and does. And as a matter of fact, what we have found in the last 5 years of testing with this is that we're dealing with a part of the brain that is pure cycles on a 48-hour cycle. And by that I mean, over and over and over again, we see a 48-hour figure popping up at where the effectiveness level of this dwindles after 48 hours, but is extremely strong within a 48-hour span of time. About 80% of what we specifically program into this part of the brain to have happen will happen, if it's possible at all, within 48 hours. So the results are very astounding and quick. You see them as you're going through it.
Now I have a lady back here in the dark. Doctor?
You really just answered my question. My question was, if you took the course, could you determine when they bleep these things on television, which they're doing to us, by the way, whether you could discern whether it was done and how you could analyze that within yourself?
You'll know exactly how it's done and why and what the results are.
I think a common misconception, I will just offer my 2 cents worth of the brain. I believe the brain is a receiver. Okay, it's an electrical receiver, and therefore you can receive it through these subliminal dynamics.
Oh, there's no question about the fact you can receive it. You can also access it.
I guess that's it.
I would like to thank everyone very, very much.